Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. We are 100% sponsor based, which means that all the revenues we derive come from sponsorships. But I try to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically trying to choose those who have values well aligned to the values expressed on this show, like freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do is a few ad reads right here at the top of the show and then a few ad reads in the middle. And I hope you won't skip them. I hope you'll take the time, listen, and see what they have to offer, because again, these are hand-selected sponsors. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Pacific Bitcoin Conference, brought to you by Swan. Now, this is going to be a 2-day event in Los Angeles, November 10th and 11th, 2022. And if you haven't been to a Bitcoin conference yet, I highly recommend it, as there really is no better way to get integrated into the Bitcoin community. Speakers announced so far include Michael Saylor, Lynn Alden, many others. I'll be speaking as well. Michael Saylor is even quoted as saying, "This is going to be the event of the year, so you definitely don't want to miss it." So go to pacificbitcoin.com and use discount code BREEDLOVE to get your tickets today. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Ledn. Ledn lets you do more with your digital assets. For instance, Ledn offers a B2X loan product that lets you leverage your existing Bitcoin to buy even more Bitcoin. Or you can also get traditional Bitcoin collateralized US dollar loans through Ledn as well. Ledn also offers both Bitcoin and USDC denominated savings accounts, letting you generate yield on your digital assets. Recently, Ledn has launched a Bitcoin mortgage product as well that lets you use Bitcoin to buy a home or finance one that you already own. So go to ledn.io, that's LEDN.io today to sign up. Curt Jaimungal, welcome to the What is Money Show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Great to have you here. Just by way of quick introduction for my audience, you are a filmmaker who decided to pursue filmmaking while studying mathematical physics at the University of Toronto. You are the host of the very popular Theories of Everything. You observe topics on theoretical physics, consciousness, God, free will, all the profound questions that we tend to outwardly ignore but inwardly wrestle with. Theories of Everything is one of the fastest growing science and philosophy podcasts. It analyzes the current state of theories of everything, that is, a surveillance of the field theories of everything, pros, cons, and the relations of each. To be a part of the discussion, type Theories of Everything. Oh, this is your... I was reading an intro for you, and then it sounds like that last part is not part of what I should read. So, Theories of Everything, very cool podcast with a lot of interesting guests and fascinating conversations. What I thought we would do today is just talk about your experience starting the show, running the show, hosting the show. I'm really curious, just individually, as one podcaster to another. And then also, I wanted to get a sense for like how much it's changed you, because I know that doing this show, talking to a lot of big thinkers has certainly had an influence on me. So I wanted to get a feel for that for you. So just to get started, maybe you could tell my audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your podcast, and how your journey brought you into this field.
Sure. Thanks, man. So my name is Curt, as you have heard already, and I have a podcast called Theories of Everything. What it is, it's more of a project than a podcast. And what I mean is that I'm interested in TOES. So that's the acronym for Theories of Everything. I stumbled upon the Theories of Everything podcast in my effort to learn more about TOES. I want to... A theory of everything, first of all, well, what the heck is it? That's not easy to define because there's some controversy there. Some people take the word everything to mean everything, and then some people try to define, well, what is a thing? So that's Carl Friston's approach, and Jacques Vallée has an approach like that. What the heck does it mean for there to be a thing and then every of it? Well, initially what I meant was quantum mechanics and then quantum field theory and then gravity, which is general relativity. Combining them is considered to be a toe. And then it's synonymized sometimes with grand unified theories, but those are actually separate. I'm interested in those as well. As I wanted to learn more about theories of everything, some people said consciousness is involved quantum mechanically, but perhaps even more fundamentally than that. And so at first, being the person who came from an academic background and just learned math and physics, I was someone who excoriated that view as being generally one of mystics who misunderstand quantum mechanics and like to use the word quantum to give some scientific credence to whatever they're espousing mystically. But as I started investigating it more and more, I'm less and less certain about virtually everything. You wanted to know, how did it change me? Well, it put me in this void where I tumble, and it's not exactly a pleasant place to be. So on the podcast, I also investigate consciousness. What role does that have to play what role does that have to play with regard to the fundamental laws? And is the conceptualization of fundamental laws the correct conceptualization? Because that implies reductionism, and maybe that's not the correct paradigm. So I'm interested in that as well. How about your podcast? What got you started with yours, man? I assume it's not just about money. I looked through your guest list. Some of these people have not, well, maybe tangentially have some views on money.
Yeah, we definitely get into the nature of money. So it gets quite philosophical, because the history of human beings and the history of humanity are pretty tightly bound. What got me started on the show was, I have an accounting and finance background, and I had basically started a company to work for myself. Initially, it was a CFO consulting services. But when I started that company, it freed me up to investigate a lot of new things. This was late 16, early 17. And so I started learning about crypto, really. And long story short, one thing led to another. I ended up way down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and then operating a hedge fund in the space for a number of years. And during that time, I was writing monthly updates to my investors. And I also started publishing like research findings just on the history of money and whatnot. And these things were becoming popular. My written work was becoming popular in Bitcoin circles, and I got invited on a podcast to talk about it. Those podcasts were popular. And so once again, kind of one thing led to another, and people were telling me they wanted more, right? More writing, more talking. And so I just jumped on the bandwagon and started a podcast. And got really lucky. My first guest was Michael Saylor. Came on for 17
talk about a first guest.
episodes. Yeah, just, dynamite guest. And, I guess part of the interaction with him, and then also just other things going on in life, I really started to want to focus on education. I just decided I was getting more meaning out of that. And so the podcast is a great way to help, educate people about things, to learn. Really, I don't even like to say education necessarily, because on the podcast, I'm basically learning, right? I'm learning from these other guests. We're engaging in dialogue, trying to get to truth on some particular topic. And you're really just letting your audience observe that dialogical process in a way. So I've called it learning out loud, as opposed, whereas education sort of sounds like I have some final answer that I'm trying to sell to an audience, which I don't really. I'm just, it's exploratory. Strong opinions, loosely held, as they say. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell for me.
Yeah. So you went to school for finance and accounting?
Accounting and finance, yeah. So I had a bit of a background about it. Yes, we do. The other part of your question, we talk about way more than just money. Money is this tool that we use to establish consensus on the relativity of exchange values, for instance. So it's got these informational components, it's got energy components, it's got a component. When you look at property rights, I think it's something like the way human beings express territoriality. Most social animals are territorial. Humans have just enshrined it in this institution called private property, and money is the most important form of private property. So we talk about a lot of other things. We go down a lot of rabbit holes through that. To get back to you, so I wonder, was the title, the theories of everything, the first time I heard that term was, I think I read the book by Stephen Hawking. Pretty sure he has a book called Theory of Everything that I read when I was young. So I wanted to ask you about the inspiration for the title. And then also, you were just saying your interaction with your guests has made you less sure of everything, which is interesting, right? It's almost, I find that happening with me as well, that I've become much more, I have a much greater affinity for Socrates when he said, the only thing I know is that I know nothing at all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think that he did claim to know some things. So firstly, he was a theist. He believed strongly in the gods. And there was something else that he believed that him saying I know nothing was, it's popularized as his main phrase, but I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's what he truly believed. But anyway, I agree. Except I don't want to know nothing. It's not like I said, it's not pleasant. So right. I try to minimize that, but I can't help but being shaken terribly from time to time. So, okay, the name Theories of Everything, that comes from the physics term. It's a physics term. And so it means, what are the laws that we can write down mathematically that can predict every other observable phenomenon in a physical sense, materialist sense. Well, you don't need to insert the word material there, because it turns out science is philosophically agnostic, despite most scientists thinking that it proves or claims or assumes materialism. It doesn't. But anyway, so how can you predict any phenomenon or show that whatever we see here at a large scale, so for instance, that this is derived from something that's more fundamental? And then also, it'd be great if this theory could yield new predictions and be falsifiable. That's pretty much what the word theory of everything means. And like I mentioned, technically it's gravity and quantum field theory, but it's taken to be a bit more than that now.
Right.
Okay. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about paradoxes, if you don't mind.
Yeah. One of my favorite words.
Okay. Right. So have you heard of Newcomb's paradox?
I don't think so.
Okay, so it's a money paradox. And I, just in case you're interested, I'm writing a book on paradoxes. I'm writing a book on paradoxes / free will and consciousness, basically the subjects of the TOE podcast. And I'm doing so because I forget so much of it. Like, from one podcaster to another, I study voraciously for different guests, and then I end up forgetting it about 1 month later, almost all of what I've studied, because it's much like I'm cramming for an exam or a test, and then I have to move on to the next course. And I don't like that. It's not a, well, I feel like a fool, and there's so much else that I need to know, and I need to remember. I need to have the stepping stones, and I'm constantly removing the stepping stones, or they're just disappearing behind me. So as an effort for me to remember more, I'm writing a book. I'm like, that's like, well, anyway, who knows if this book will even be released. But either way, I'm writing a book. So paradoxes. There's a paradox called Newcomb's paradox. And what it is okay, imagine there's a genie. Okay, so there's this genie, and he has 2 boxes in front of you. And he says, and one box is transparent, it's made out of glass. So you can see what's inside, and the other is a safe. It's made out of metal, you can't see what's inside. So the transparent one, the glass one right here, has $1,000 in it. You can see the $1,000. Okay, so you can see the $1,000. And the other one, the genie says, what's in this safe is either $1 million or nothing. Okay, so, well, what decides whether it's $1 million or nothing? The genie says, as soon as you entered this room, I scanned your brain. I'm like a supercomputer. I'm like God. I predicted whether you will choose both. Like, you're going to have the choice. Do you want both boxes to take home, or do you want just the safe? Okay, now if the genie says, I've predicted, well, I'm not going to tell you my prediction, but here's what the rules are. If you take both, there will be nothing in the safe. So I'm going to punish you for being greedy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just choose the safe, there's going to be $1 million inside. Now, I am infallible, so I know which one you will choose. What do you do? Okay, so let me know if the conditions are clear.
I think the conditions are clear, but isn't it obvious that he would just, well, I guess if you believe the genie, you would just take the metal box.
Right, right. Okay, now here's where there's some conflict, because as a rational being who wants to maximize the amount of money you have, when you enter the room, this is why it gets into the tricky subjects of rationality, which people think is so clear cut. It's not. And same with free will. It's like there's two different kinds of rationality. So one where you want to maximize your own, well, two different kinds of decision theory. So there's causal, it doesn't matter. There's names for these. One where you want to maximize the amount of money you have, and then the other where you just think about, well, what does the evidence lead me to believe? Okay, so the evidence leads you to believe that, hey, this genie has done this I didn't say this, but has done this thousands of times and is always correct. He always predicts correctly. So, and he said he's infallible. I'm going to believe him. This is the voice of God. I'm going to just choose this one safe. Okay, but then the causal decision theory says, well, the genie has already made up his mind. So then the other point of view is, look, I've entered this place. The money is either in the safe or not. So no matter what, there's either $1 million there or there's nothing. I may as well take both boxes. So I can get $1 million plus 1,000, or I can get, maybe there's nothing in the box. Let me just take both. So that's the paradox. Well, which one do you do?
It's interesting.
Like the point is like, well, if you want to maximize the amount of money, what do you do? That's essentially the question. What do you do?
Yeah, so it's drawing this line between the two forms of rationality you described. One is like enhancing or maximizing your expected value, which would be to take both boxes, versus what does the evidence lead you to believe, which is like, I guess the other embedded presupposition there is that if it's almost like the genie already either did put the money in the box or not.
Yeah.
Right?
I should have said that. That is the case. The genie has put the money or hasn't already.
Oh, it has.
As soon as you came in, he made that decision.
Okay.
And then he placed money in there without you looking.
Got it. I was
or
just
not,
saying,
or,
the
or
genie,
just,
he could make it appear or vanish based on your decision, perhaps.
no. Yeah, so it's already there. So now that you know that, what would you do, Robert?
Well, I guess if I'm talking to a genie, I believe he's a genie, I'm probably going to believe the guy. But that the devil's kind of in the details for what makes you believe.
Okay, so now here's a variation on that same problem. Okay, you can advise your friend. So there's still a genie, the whole setup, except now it's your friend coming in, and it's not you. You're standing behind the box. So remember, the box, this one is transparent, and then this one is opaque. Okay, well, you're now on this side, so you can see the transparent one, just like your friend can see the transparent one. But on the other side of the safe, there's some glass, so you can actually see whether the genie put in the money or not. Now, you would always tell your friend, just take both boxes, because you can see, you can see either there's money in there or there's not. So just take both boxes. Every time the decision is just take both boxes because you can see it. Then the question is, well, why does that make a difference at all?
Wow, that's a great question.
Well, anyway, it's just for me, I think about this, and I have to stop. I have to tell myself to stop, and like I have OCD and these intrusive thoughts now, and I have to do meditation and mindfulness so I don't think about it. And
that's a really interesting one, actually, because well, I guess so the takeaway there is always maximize expected value. This is like poker, right? If you're playing poker to high level, you're basically always trying to make positive expected value calculations. So it sounds like that was this case, that you should just always take both boxes no matter what the genie says.
Yeah, but it's strange because the genie is right, and there shouldn't be any money in the first box if you're going to take both boxes. So what's the resolution to this paradox? There is none. This is something that's been debated for, I think, decades. And there are proposed solutions, and then people find errors with those solutions. And this continues on and on. So there's also the question of, well, See, on the Theories of Everything podcast, we talk about UFOs sometimes, and people are like, "Well, why the heck do you care about UFOs and evidence and so on and so on? The extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence and so on." Well, firstly, evidence is not clear cut. Secondly, it's not as if there's a difference between extraordinary evidence and regular evidence. As Brian Keating says, it's not like he's an experimental physicist. He's like, there's no box that I tell my graduate students, okay, now let's get the extraordinary evidence, put it in the extraordinary evidence box. And then there's some paradoxes when it comes to what constitutes evidence.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to say them without.
Seems like too though, because if you did just trust the genie and only take the metal box, but the money was not in the box, then wouldn't the genie be lying at that point?
No, then you would have gotten 1 million.
But I thought he already decided whether
just take
the money is in there or not.
He calculates as soon as you come in. He calculates. He reads your brain and he knows what decision you're going to make.
Huh.
So if he knows that you're going to take just the safe, there will just be $1 million in the safe. And if he knows that you're going to take both, then he will make sure there's zero. Then he doesn't put anything.
So if he knows you're only going to take the metal box and he puts the $1 million in the box, and then your friend is standing on the other side of the box telling you to just take both anyways, because there's 1,000,001.
Yeah, that's where the paradox is. Like,
I guess your friend doesn't know the rules of the game. Otherwise, he wouldn't be telling you to take.
Well, right then and there, if he tells you to take both, that's what's so tricky about this, is that as soon as another person observes it, why does that make a difference? Why the heck would that make a difference at all? Anyway, yeah, we can continue to talk about that for like
Thanks
for hours and hours.
Starting my brain first thing in the day here.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting one. So your book is going to be about this then, right? Writing, exploring paradoxes, free will, consciousness, etc.
Yeah. And then right, just I like to do that, and then secondly, well, firstly, it's fun, and I'm sure you have fun on your podcast. Maybe that's the primary reason you do it.
Right.
And for me, and I'm sure for you, you would be doing what you're doing if you had all the money in the world.
Yes.
Maybe not all the money in the world. You would maybe help out different causes and so on, but you understand.
Yeah, it's a very fulfilling occupation, and one that came about quite organically. It's not something I ever chose for myself, which is interesting. It's how that evolves over time. But yeah, I love to read. I love to talk about big ideas, and now I get to do that for a living. So it's pretty incredible. What was your inspiration originally for starting Theories of Everything?
I wanted to learn Donald Hoffman's theories. So if you've heard of Donald Hoffman, yep.
Yeah,
okay, so I wanted to learn. He makes many claims about consciousness, and people just take it and say, "Wow, that's so profound." And I'm thinking, okay, but he's tying this to some mathematics. I have a background in math, so why don't I just read the papers and then interview him? It doesn't seem like anyone is doing that, so that's what I did. And then I had a great technical interview with him, and people seem to like that because there seemed to be a dearth of that in the podcast space. So then I was encouraged by that, because I actually like to read papers, and I like to not play devil's advocate or pinholes or criticize, but just talk to people and say, here's what occurs to me when you say so and so. Unless it's like office hours with a professor, you're allowed to ask whatever questions you like to this intellectual giant. So why don't I just do that and see where this goes? And it ended up taking off. I'm again saying I think this is the story of podcasts. I don't know of many people who are successful at podcasts. What I mean is that they have a somewhat large podcast that went into it trying to make a podcast. It's more like they happened upon it.
Yeah.
Do you think so? I'm sure people ask you, like, what's the advice that you have for a new podcaster? Do you think that is there such a huge element of chance that you would just either have to stumble upon it and be successful, or, well, essentially get lucky, or, well, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, my general advice is to do what is interesting to you, right? Like my litmus test for my episodes is I want to have conversations with people that I think I will find interesting. I have questions I want answered, for whatever reason. And so if I'm genuinely engaged and hopefully attaining some dialogue with my guests, that seems to be the magic that people really get into. It's like dialogue, active dialogue about big ideas is almost like a spectator sport where,
Mm-hmm.
you see two people, like when I see Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris debate, not that a podcast always has to be a debate, but that's one form of dialogue. That is exhilarating, right? You're seeing two people kind of pushing the boundaries on their mental models, kind of battling in a way, and then you're a spectator in that process, so it's challenging your own viewpoints. And
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a debate format or just a discussion format, I feel like um, that process where you're banging these things together, you're reaching for unexplored territory, trying to get a misconception brought into the world of knowledge or common consensus somehow. That seems to be the sport that is podcasting or dialogue. So I try and just try to aim for people that I think are interesting to talk to about ideas I want to learn about.
Yeah, I think I was I just I think Plato had the first podcast. It's just before there were podcasts. Like he had the dialogical forum with
Right,
Socrates and so
right.
on. And I think that's what podcasts are an extension of that. We're all just, so in a sense we're all following Rogan,
Yeah,
but in another sense we're all following Plato.
yeah. No, that's a great framing. I've said that podcast is like the resurgence of dialogue in the digital age, because in the 20th century we had a very top-down media model, right? When my mom was a kid, I remember her saying all we had were channels 3, 6, 3, 9, and 12. I think she said if the president's on, you're fucked. So we moved from that model where there's like very few media organs, propagating out to everyone, to now
Yeah.
we have this. It's like from a
Yeah.
one mini computer networking model to a mini
Uh-huh.
mini model, and now
Uh-huh.
nodes on this distributed network of thought called the
Yeah,
internet.
that must speak, that must resonate well with you because if you're into Bitcoin, you have a central philosophical tenet of decentralization.
Yes.
I'm curious to ask you, if you don't mind, something I was thinking about is how far does that go? And what I mean by that is there such a thing as too much freedom, too much decentralization?
Well, I think it's a good question, and there's definitely trade-offs. There's the old adage that if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So if
Hmm.
you stick to one centralized plan, right? If someone
Mhm.
laid out a plan right now and just said, "Hey, we need to build spaceships. Everyone in the world needs to build spaceships, just full time, flat out. That's what we need to do." That would be like one centralized plan. And if everyone did that, well, we could make a lot of spaceships really quickly, right? We could do it really
Mhm.
fast. But I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think like to adhere to a centralized plan over time doesn't seem to be sustainable, because what it requires everyone to do is to drop their own wants or preferences and follow the central plan, right? And that's why I think central planning historically has failed many, many times. The libertarian philosopher Hayek made a great point too. He said, even if you could craft the perfect central plan and say, here's what everyone should do in the world right now to best satisfy everyone else's wants in the most profitable, economically efficient way, that the moment you put that plan into motion, it would start to deviate from reality, because reality is always changing. So central planning, again, even if it was the perfect plan for a moment in time, it would never, it's hard for it to be sustainable over time because reality is always changing. The opposite end of that spectrum, it's really central planning versus decentralized planning, right? Because decentralization doesn't mean no planning. It just means each individual plans for themselves, or they engage in common enterprises like companies with others, and they make collective plans. But the point is, there's no plan being imposed from on high on you. That's what I think decentralization would kind of be the spirit of. And if you want something that's going to last for a long time, like a mode of human socioeconomic organization that's going to be sustainable, that's going to go far, I think you have to do it in a decentralized way. Ultimately, there's a great paper on this called "The Use of Knowledge in Society" by Hayek, the same guy I just mentioned, and he makes this argument that knowledge sort of emerges everywhere and at local scales, and its utility diminishes, right? Like you get local knowledge that's useful right then and there, but if you had to pass that knowledge to a bureaucracy, wait 2 weeks, get approval, and then finally comes back and you can do whatever the thing is, that really reduces the adaptivity of the marketplace and market actors, right? They can't act on local fresh knowledge, right? So it's losing some value when it goes through the machinery of bureaucracy, for instance. So I think you want to decentralize as much as possible, but that sort of leaves out the big central questions, like what should we be doing as a society? What should we be optimizing for? Is it GDP? Is it some other metric of human flourishing? Et cetera. And I think Bitcoin's kind of an interesting animal in that way, that it's a decentralized network that doesn't have any political leaders inside of it, yet it's centered on this motif of 21 million. Like that is kind of the central plan of Bitcoin, right? It's like no matter what happens, this thing stays at 21 million.
Why is it 21 and not 20?
It's arbitrary. It's arbitrary what the number is, actually. It's just the fact that it doesn't change.
Yeah.
So you have a money that cannot be inflated or counterfeited. And that's the key. Could be, who knows why. I mean, there's a lot of thinking about why Satoshi chose 21 million. I could point you to some Twitter threads on it and whatnot, but I haven't been down into that rabbit hole too much. I would just say the magic of the magic number 21 million is that it doesn't change.
Yeah. So I guess my question about decentralization becomes a question about freedom. And in the Marxist circles, I hear them, they also care about freedom, or at least claim to.
Right.
And so it seems like everyone is just pursuing freedom. But then to me, I don't know if freedom is what we like. Well, how far does freedom go? Because you have skin. Now that's a form of a border. You have constraints on you with the laws of physics, and you want those there. You were taught a language, and so you didn't choose, firstly, to be born, secondly, to learn the values you learned, to learn the language that you learned. And so there is a form of tyranny of parenting. And then there's the laissez-faire kind of parenting, and I don't like to be around those children, and I'm sure most people don't, including the parents. But that's because people have this need or have this philosophy that, no, I don't want to impose because I don't like when the government imposes. But then they constantly think about it in terms of government. So I'm just curious, well, like how far does this freedom, do we not need constraints? Jordan Peterson, I'm sure, talks about this with order and chaos. You need both. Ian McGilchrist talks about this. There needs to be some constraint as well.
Yeah, and we
unbridled freedom is not something. We have little ideas to what the heck unbridled freedom looks like.
Yeah, and so I guess
even if you're on an island and it's just you, there's still manifold restrictions with your body, with other animals. So what level and type of confinement is okay? I don't know.
Yeah. So the fundamental constraints that none of us know how to throw off really are like thermodynamics, right? Gravity, Earth's gravity. Every organism's survival strategy is adapted to Earth's gravity on Earth. Obviously, when we build cars and buildings, they're designed to stay. They're designed to have structural integrity in Earth's gravity. Yeah. So there are certain restraints. So I guess the question is, what additional man-made restraints should we be placing on ourselves? And the Rothbardian argument, this is a very strong argument made from the libertarian philosophy, the school of libertarian philosophy. I'm thinking of his book in particular, The Ethics of Liberty, is that the boundary should be private property. Now you have to understand what property means. It basically means, most fundamentally, you own yourself, you own your own body. And then the things you go into the world and justly acquire, by extension,
Mhm.
your own individual self-ownership become yours. So when we talk about increasing freedom, I think that is the natural limiting principle. Is it you want everyone to have maximal freedom to do whatever they want, with the limiting principle of other people's person and property, right? Like I should go into the world and accumulate whatever value I need, so long as I don't hurt anyone or steal from anyone. And that
Mm.
process, if you honor that boundary of private property, the interesting thing about that is that it creates more freedom, defined as
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
opening up of option space. So the guy that's on the desert island, there's just certain things he can't do, right? If he's just there with only his body, he can't really leave the island. He doesn't have a boat or an aircraft. He can only pick fruit with his hands. He doesn't have tools and whatnot. But what can you do? He can delay gratification, right? Spend less time consuming fish, more time building a fishing rod. And then the next thing you know, he's economized fish production, right? He can catch more fish per hour with a rod than he does with his hands. And then he can spend a bit more time building a boat. And all of a sudden, he's increasing his option space into how far out to sea he can go. Maybe he can eventually leave the island. And so it's that process, that capitalistic process, that creates more freedom in the world, creates more options. For the Marxists out there, I would again point to the Mises critique of socialism. They basically prove that socialism doesn't work because it doesn't produce price signals. So we can't allocate capital intelligently. And that's why it degenerates into this game of just statist rhetoric and nonsense. And ultimately, I would think, mass murder again. Um, we're all just animals trying to do the best with the assets at hand. And if you don't have a price signal and property rights to allocate these things intelligently and non-violently, then whatever system you build on top of it degenerates, is my view on that.
Man, I have many philosophical questions, but I think like we should save it for when
Yeah,
you come on my podcast.
yes, I need to ask
'Cause-
you some more questions out.
yeah, well, that's fine. I enjoy this. Well, like here's just some thoughts, and maybe I could put them in your brain for you to think about if you haven't thought about them, which I'm sure you have. So it sounds like, okay, well, I want to maximize my freedom today to the degree that it allows me to quote unquote go far, like you mentioned before. So maximize future freedom. So
Mhm.
somehow okay, but then how far does that go? How far? Like, what the heck does this extreme freedom? Well, we don't want freedom from the physical laws of nature. Well, then also, what's the difference between you and a law of nature? Is there a separation? There's this great conversation with this, well, by this mathematician named Raymond Smullyan. So people can look this up. Raymond Smullyan. I basically read it aloud on my channel, and it's Raymond Smullyan. It's a conversation between man and God, and the man is saying to God, "Why did you give me freedom? I find this to be a huge imposition because I have this huge moral weight to do good, and it's not easy to do good, and it's impossible to do 100% good. So please remove my freedom." And then God's like, well, why don't I remove the feelings of badness that you have, like the guilt? Then the guy's like, he thinks about it, he's like, well, if you remove that, then I may commit atrocities in the future, and myself now would be responsible for those future atrocities because I'm removing my guilt center.
Mhm.
So okay, so I'm just mad at you for giving me freedom to begin with. And then it's this whole conversation of back, it's like a dialogue, like Plato, back
Mhm.
and forth between a man and God. And it's so playful. Raymond Smullyan's this great writer. He's dead now. It's one of the people I would like to interview, who I can't, but it then becomes all about, well, the distinction between you and natural law, and what is free will, and what is God, and what is goodness, and is there sin. It's this is why when I read your description, if I'm recalling it correctly, I liked it because it said something like, I explore what is money and the rabbit hole that entails,
Yeah,
something along the lines
yeah,
of that.
yeah.
Oh yeah, because I think that if you explore almost any phenomenon, so for instance, these headphones or this Bliss Tech here. Bliss
Yeah.
Text. It's a chapstick. That if you explore it and you try to understand it completely, it leads you to virtually every other question. You see this in science, where if you want to learn about a butterfly's brain, you need to learn about a lizard's brain, and then you need to learn about evolution, and you need to learn about the whole phylogenetic tree to well, not the whole, but maybe the whole, if you want to learn about or put out a thesis on a butterfly's brain. So then it's extremely interesting, because I was speaking to someone named Chloe Valdry. Do you know who that is? Chloe Valdry? Okay, well, anyway, she's more of the consciousness, Zen, mindfulness, Eastern type, who was saying, Curt, I don't like your analytical approach with Toe, because it's not going to lead you to answers. There, you can't have an analytical answer to an experiential problem. And I think that that's the case, and I also don't think that what I'm doing with Toe is just analytical. I think that there's something about this format, Robert, with both you and I, and you and your guests, and me and my guests, that isn't necessarily propositional, because we're just speaking. And it's not like you can have a room full of people and then meditate with them. But off air, I'm sure you do plenty of experiential work, and same with myself. So it's not as if I'm not exploring experientially. But then I also wonder how much of that's true. Cantor, for instance, thought he was analyzing the mind of God by analyzing infinity mathematically. And there are many other, historically, people thought that studying physics was the same as studying God. And that's one of the reasons why there's so much writings about God from Newton. He thought and that's one of the reasons why there's order to the universe at all, why we can do science, because God made it intelligible. At least this is their view.
Yes.
Oh, so yeah. So did you also feel this to be the case, that if we were to study anything, we incorporate everything? Okay.
Yes. Well, man, so much good stuff there. I think it was the physicist Brome that described reality as the unbroken wholeness. So it's in everything touches everything else, right? It's continuous throughout, but we, as rational beings, use language and thought to kind of draw boxes around things, and we turn a perception into a conception. And then so to go from rock to the idea of a rock, and then we create a language that's established on, it's our consensus of understanding. So when I create this sound with my mouth that says rock, it's like I can reliably presume you're running the same open source software called English, that it conjures up roughly the same image that I had in my mind, right? So it's interesting that it's like, I've said this a number of ways. Reality is like a stack of patterns on patterns on patterns that rhyme but don't repeat. Or you could look at it as like an ocean with no shore and no surface, that the whole thing is just this continual fluid body that's wholly interconnected. But to navigate it, we have to map it, right? And we have to map it with these with concepts and conceptions and groupings and ideas, which we then, obviously it's an abstraction away from reality, like when you convert an experience into something linguistic. But the linguistics, and paradoxically perhaps, somehow let you navigate that reality more efficiently, effectively, et cetera, over time, right? It lets you build a better boat, a car, jet, spaceship, whatever it may be. So there is something really fascinating about that, and it is divine in a way, I guess, in that we're sort of, if the idea of God as the creator, whatever words you want to insert there, nature, the universe, whatever that creative force is that made all this, we kind of participate in that to some extent, because we know that we can create new tools and new ideas, new languages, et cetera, that actually influence our own evolutionary path. All right, we mentioned this earlier, just the idea of private property. That's not a thing. That doesn't exist anywhere. It's this game that we've kind of imagined. Yet if we pretend it's true, if we pretend everyone owns themselves and everyone has rights to the fruit of their own labor, then we create this very pragmatic outcome of more wealth in the world. So that's interesting to me, that we're kind of like the animal that plays imagination, but the imaginal play that we engage in has very real consequences.
This is where I'm not sure. So I don't know if private property is just a social construct. I don't know if there's something like the Platonic forms, which is mathematical, but for any idea or any conception. So it exists. It's just not in the way that we think of existence. And then also, I don't know if I don't know if I know it's said so frequently in the modern and perhaps even ancient Eastern side that it's non-dualism is what you're at least intimating, or at least insinuating. Sorry. I wonder how much of that is strangely a left brain phenomenon on something that's a right brain issue. So what I mean by that is it sounds like, hey, no, what are you talking about? Like the left brain is the analytical one. We're the more creative types who are the ones that are in touch with consciousness, and we could see the undividedness of nature. I don't know. I know that Ian McGilchrist says that the left brain likes to categorize and place as wholes everything and see everything as the same. Whereas the right brain, the creative one, is actually the one that likes to make distinctions and see this as different. And I just don't know. I've had experiences of oneness. I've also had many experiences of dividedness. And I wonder how much of it is see, metaphysically, I think the next number up from 1 is not 2, it's 3. And the reason is that if you have a vertex, then if you add another vertex, it doesn't mean anything to this vertex unless there's a connection. So as soon as you have as soon as you have 2 and then the connection, then you have 3 objects. You have 2 vertices and 1 edge, or just a single vertex. So I wonder how much of reality is a threeness or even more, and we're saying it's undivided. That's the wrong way of saying it, and we're saying it's both undivided and not, and that's wrong. But then am I perverting every metaphysical claim with my language? It's just abandonment of language, the route. Well, that's what some monks say, like just stop. It's even a sin to speak, or at least a sin to be curious and speak about these large issues. I don't know. I've had feelings of each way, and I'm constantly. Yes, I think you asked me, like, what have I learned from this podcast? I've just learned to, like, try to go with the waves, and geez, that's not easy, because I want to swim upward and breathe. So sometimes I'm like, sometimes I gasp, but I'm just being tumbled in a whirlpool. Descartes had a quote about this too. Anyway,
it's fascinating.
Yeah, I don't have a question there, but it's essentially just saying, like, I wish I had the same worldview or same certainty as other people. I just don't know.
I agree with you about, yeah,
and I don't see it as, by the way, I don't see it as a virtue to be like the Socratic, like, not knowing. I think that it's healthy to have a certain amount of closed-mindedness, and maybe that's even harkens back to what I was saying about constraints as well as openness. You need that, otherwise you'll just dissolve in a pool.
You're right. Yeah. I think Chesterton said, "Don't be so open-minded that your brains fall out everywhere."
Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. There's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. Like, I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. Wasabi lets you use Bitcoin privately while still maintaining full control over your money. Specifically, Wasabi Wallet is an open source, non-custodial wallet with privacy built in by default. By using Wasabi, you're effectively putting the private back in private property. Wasabi Wallet is an easy-to-use privacy wallet that can support any amount of Bitcoin transactions. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download this state-of-the-art wallet software. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Swan Private. Swan Private is a concierge financial services firm based in Los Angeles. Now, I've known the Swan team for years, and these guys are laser focused on the Bitcoin mission. They even have a zero tolerance policy for all shitcoining. Recently, their CEO, Corey Clipston, was instrumental in calling out many of these crypto scams right before they collapsed, saving a lot of people a lot of money in the process. Swan Private focuses on guiding high net worth individuals and businesses on all aspects of Bitcoin strategy, including buying, custodying, and market research. This concierge service provides you direct access to a private advisor by text, phone, or email. So go to swanprivate.com/breedlove today to sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Bitcoin Conference 2023. This is going to be a 3-day event held May 18th through 20th, 2023 in Miami, Florida. This is going to be the biggest Bitcoin event of the year, and the past 2 years in Miami have been simply amazing. Speakers already announced for 2023 include Michael Saylor, Alex Gladstein, Corey Clipston, and many others. Last year, we did a 10 million sats giveaway specifically for this event, and we're going to do it again this year. So, to get discounted tickets and enter for a chance to win 10 million sats, go to b.tc/conference/2023 and use discount code BREEDLOVE. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Masterworks. Masterworks gives you access to the fine art market at more affordable price points. They do this by offering you fractional shares in their $500 million portfolio of fine art. Now, fine art is an alternative asset class, and historically, it's been a great performer and a really good hedge against inflation. Most investors typically hold anywhere from 2 to 10% of their assets in an asset like fine art. To sign up or learn more, go to masterworks.com and use promo code BREEDLOVE. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Casa. Casa makes it simple to buy and secure your Bitcoin without wondering whether you're doing it right. Specifically, Casa provides a multi-key custody solution, which is by far the most secure way to custody your Bitcoin. Now, when I talk about Bitcoin being theft-proof money or inviolable private property, a multi-key custody model is exactly what I am talking about. Using multiple keys lets you maintain full control of your Bitcoin while also giving you redundancy in case you lose one of the keys. It's also the best way to secure your Bitcoin for inheritance planning purposes. So go to keys.casa, that's C-A-S-A, today to sign up and use discount code BREEDLOVE.
And it always comes back for me to that relational aspect. You know, Peterson calls it order and chaos. Obviously, I did this long series on metaphysics. It was about the book Leela by Robert Pirsig, but he's making the point that subject object is kind of a false paradigm, that there's really this betweenness that is more a higher resolution depiction of reality, if you will. I've talked to John Vervaeke a lot about this too. He says rather than subjectivity or objectivity, the betweenness is transjectivity. It's like there's this infinite complex system around us called reality, and then we're trying to generate different knowledge structures to map portions of it and communicate about it. But we have to take all of those, I call these like a symbolic structure, if you will. This could be anything. This could be a theory. This could be, force equals mass times acceleration. This could be a company. These are all just symbolic structures we've created to help us do something practical with that reality, to navigate it or understand it or talk about it. But we have to always understand that those symbolic structures are provisional, right? They're subject to change. Newton gave us certain laws that made a lot of sense for a long time and let us accomplish practical things in the real world. but eventually those laws were proven to be insufficient to be a deeper descriptor of reality, right? As when Einstein came along, for instance. So I guess that's the way I look at it overall now. I'm not saying the only thing I know is I know nothing at all. Knowledge serves no purpose, but I think Aristotle said the purpose of knowledge is not knowledge, it's action, right? So that these structures we create need to ground out in some practical change in how we engage with the world. Otherwise, they're not useful. And then we also have to understand, and in that way, I would kind of think, based on all that, I kind of think maybe we can't have a theory of everything. Like, you could maybe keep reaching and always have a theory of everything, but I don't know that we'll ever hit the bottom and be like, oh, this is it. This piece of knowledge encodes everything about reality. I don't know that that's even possible.
Yeah, I agree. And there are some mathematical reasons why that's not the case. I'm sure you've heard of Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the question is, well, if physics is embedded in math and math is incomplete, then is the whole physical enterprise, the whole theory of everything enterprise a doomed one? Well, maybe that's why I think even defining what a theory of everything is a treacherous endeavor, because maybe we just want a theory of most, and that's and that's good enough, and that's what, or we want, well, who knows, man? Who knows? I'm so torn. I oscillate so frequently on this. By the way, who's someone? Okay, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'll state this, but if what you were going to say was more important, then please go. Who is someone historically that you would like to have interviewed, like on your top 2 or 3 list?
That I have not interviewed yet.
Yeah, that's dead. That's no longer around.
Oh, that's dead. Wow. Well, Mises, right off the bat, the most profound writer and thinker in Austrian economics, as far as I can tell. I mean, there's a lot, but he's really, really stands out to me. Plato, I mean, that guy's, after going through, I went through The Republic recently with John Vervaeke, this other book. Yeah, Plato's super interesting thinker. I would love to have talked to. I would love to have talked with Jesus of Nazareth, man.
Okay, yeah. All right, of course, yeah.
But yeah, those are 3 for me. What about you?
I don't know. I was gonna say Jesus is number 1, but I didn't even think about this until I asked. So I need to think about this some more. John von Neumann. He's a mathematician.
Never mind. I was thinking of a different Neumann.
So von Neumann, you may have heard of von Neumann machines, which is the idea that there can be extraterrestrials that send out probes, and those probes self-replicate, and it just happens ad infinitum. And then that's maybe what we're seeing when we see Tic Tacs in the sky. Those are von Neumann probes, I believe they're called. And von Neumann was just, apparently he may have been the quickest, like the highest IQ person to ever have lived.
Wow.
There are stories about, and he died so young too, like 55 or 50. There's a famous, okay, I'll give a brief aside. There's the math problem of the fly. Okay, so let's imagine you have 2 cars and they're going toward each other 50 miles per hour each. Okay. They're initially, let's say, 50 miles apart. Or let's say 100 miles apart. Okay, so they're 100 miles apart, going at each other at 50 miles per hour. Then there's a fly who is at the tip of one of these cars, and he deftly moves at 200 miles per hour, like quick, 200, but this is important, 200 miles per hour. Like from the tip of this guy's car to the next one, as soon as he hits the next one, he goes to this one, but then the initial one has traveled some bit, so then he goes to the next one, and that one has traveled a bit, and until the cars crash. Then the question is, well, how far did the fly travel? Okay, so you can do this infinite series where you plus, and then you have an infinite series, and it's a difficult one to compute. You have to use pen and paper. Or you can realize that there's a trick. okay, these cars are coming at each other at 50 miles per hour. That's akin to one of them standing still and the other going at 100 miles per hour. How far were they initially? 100 miles apart. Okay, so it takes them 1 hour to collide. This fly travels at 200 miles per hour. So then it's only traveled for 1 hour. So it's traveled 200 miles. So there's a trick. Okay, so someone said this to von Neumann, and then von Neumann said almost like in 2 seconds, he's like, okay, 200. The answer is 200. They're like, oh, you know this trick. And then he's like, what trick? I just summed the infinite series. And they're like, oh gosh. Jeez. People would say they'd be working on problems for like weeks or days, and he would come in and just offhandedly say the answer.
Right.
So he's someone I would just like to speak to.
Well, that's funny that the heuristic, you could maybe make it even simpler in that, you know, the cars were traveling for 1 hour, you know, the fly goes 200 miles an hour.
Right.
Yeah. 200
Yeah.
miles, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's just hilarious that he's like,
I can
oh,
see
just
that
summed it.
infinite series in my mind, but there's no way I could ever sum that up.
Yeah. Geez, well, and then as for a third person, I don't know.
So what about, so of guests that you've had, are there any particular conversations that really stand out to you that I don't know, have been especially popular or impactful for you personally?
Yeah, I think most of them are, and it's more difficult. Like there are just a few that haven't been. So it's easier for me to point out that these ones were just humdrum conversations, but then that's rude for me to say like, oh yeah, these 5 people.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to. I just say most of them are. How about for you? Do you find that almost each one is extremely impactful, or there are just a few?
Well, I mean, it's a wide spectrum for me, but again, I'm trying to have conversations that are fascinating. Sometimes, like, especially when we get into the political dimensions of Bitcoin, I'm just less engaged politically. I'm not, I kind of think.
Now, why is that?
Well, the way I see it is, so what do we have in and you have to be clear with your definition of politics. One definition is, it's kind of like the ethics of distributed cognition. So we're solving a lot of problems in the world by connecting our minds to other people. You know, a lot of this is the marketplace itself. There's an argument to be made. Well, okay, that distributed computing system needs an ethical component, obviously, to be, you know, to serve humans. So if you mean politics in that sense, I'm sympathetic to that. Like, yeah, of course we need ethical systems, you know, legal systems and whatnot, but the overemphasis on the political dimensions of our characters individually and collectively, this idea that, you know, your views and my views are different, so we need to go like shout it out on Twitter to try and have one of us emerge victorious to then create the rules that the rest of us need to follow. I think that is a product of the fiat currency complex. Like, we're trying to get way too many competing interests under one umbrella. Whereas in reality, these people should just live in separate states. You should have more optionality in terms of locating yourself within a jurisdiction. But the reason we don't have that is because of federal government overgrowth, which is rooted in the corruption of money itself, that we can keep printing more money to fund these programs that otherwise could not exist. So that's why I think in a Bitcoinized world, and this is a whole rabbit hole conversation, we move from a world, today we have like almost 200 nation states. I think we move into a world that has something more like 20,000 free private cities or something like that you can live within. So then in that world, why would people be arguing over whatever topic, abortion rights? You just wouldn't do it. You would just move to the place that's aligned with your values. And that would be that, right? You wouldn't need to be on Twitter having arguments about this stuff. You would just move, vote with your wallet or vote with your feet. So
have people said you need to have on more socialists or more Marxists?
No, I should talk to some, because what I've never heard a socialist or Marxist do is refute the Austrian argument that you can't compute price signals So if you can't do that, then how do you allocate capital?
Yeah.
I've never heard even a slightly viable response to that question. Instead, it just spins off into these epic fantasies of, if I was the one in charge, I could somehow make the socialist utopia a reality. We never had real socialism before. But I think that is just hubristic to the maximum.
Yeah.
You're somehow the special individual that can solve the human organizational problem that no one's ever been able to solve by,
Yeah.
concentrating power into the hands of a few. Just don't think that works.
Yeah, though interestingly enough, there are some anarchist socialists. So for instance, well, anarchist syndicist or syndicalist is Chomsky. And I remember, so someone that I know, I'll try and tiptoe around this. Someone I know closely is as radical left, like it uses the term radical left, so I'm not disparaging, as you can be. And she was saying, yeah, no, it has to be anarchistic. Like our whole enterprise has to be anarchistic. And I was thinking, how the heck, what are you talking about? As far as I know, it starts with a larger government, or it starts by you petitioning to the government to do so and so. So if you're anarchistic, shouldn't you be reeling from that and align yourself a bit more with the libertarians? So I don't know, but I haven't studied this much. And when I put out on Twitter, I said I would like to do a podcast on the potential of a large upcoming recession / crash, and what that even means, and what to do about it, practically what to do about it for people who are of the 99% and so on. Someone said, yeah, but are you going to get on someone who challenges this capitalistic system? And what I think is, much of the time they have this idea of a capitalist who, if they were to speak to that capitalist, would say, we don't have a capitalist system. You're telling me that I like the status quo. I don't like what's going. No one. They have this idea, but then also the capitalists have this idea of what a socialist is. And then you have people like Richard Wolff who said, that's not like me, and here's actually what I believe. So it's all so complex, and I'm just like here with my pen and paper and just like, give me let me stick to the partition function and Wilson loops and so on. It's much more simple. At least it's much more simple in terms of these are variables I can control.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I try and transcend that debate by just talking about statism versus, I've been calling it sovereignism. Like, you could historically call this capitalism, just pure capitalism, but we've never had that. There's never been pure capitalism, because capitalism basically means it's life, liberty, and property, right? You own yourself, you go out into the world and create things that of value that you also own. Other people do the same thing, and then you trade with people to create more wealth. But the problem is that violence and theft has always been a viable wealth acquisition strategy. So you can never have that idealized world so long as there's any form of violence or coercion. And so I think the real trick in the world is to create systems that make violating property rights more expensive. And if you make it more expensive, then you're making, theft and violence a less viable wealth acquisition strategy. And that leaves people, the only other option that leaves people with then is long-term trade, cooperation, innovation, all these things that we engage, these modes of engagement that are consensual versus non-consensual, like, taxation, theft, war, all these things are non-consensual forms of exchange. And so, yeah, I'm very partial to the capitalist that would say, no, this is not a capitalistic system, because if you understand what a central bank is, a central bank is an anti-capitalistic organization. It does not emerge on the free market, right? It's forcefully inserted by the monopolist on violence, which is the state, and it's used to control monetary policy, which is the same thing as saying it's used to steal from people. It's used to steal from people through inflation. So anyone that says this is late stage capitalism doesn't understand central banking at all. Central banking actually comes straight out of Marx's 1848 manifesto to the Communist Party. It's measure number 5, centralized state monopoly over cash and credit. It's not capitalistic, does not emerge on the free market. No one consensually accepts it. So yeah, this is not, we've never seen, and I hate to say this because it's the same argument socialists use. When I say we've never had pure capitalism in the world, the socialists will
Right, exactly.
we've never had pure socialism.
That's what it reminds me of.
We've had enough socialism to know that price signals can't be generated, capital cannot be allocated intelligently, and then you're left with just might is right, basically. That's what socialism devolves into. It doesn't have the distributed computing and allocation capabilities that capitalism does. But capitalism has been so beat up, that term, you can't use it or you get into this endless dance. So I've been writing this series called Sovereignism, where I'm like, you just honor the life, liberty, property of the individual and then let everyone else self-organize. So you never bring coercion to bear other than to protect life, liberty, and property. And this is not a new idea. This was what King John signed in 1215 when he signed the Magna Carta. They said life, liberty, inviolable property. This is the scope of government. Anything beyond this is nonsense for government to be involved with. So
yeah, it's extremely complex.
Extremely complex, and it gets into the economics of violence and force. Really, it's like it's physics ultimately. If you can project power, physical power in a certain way to steal someone else's wealth, then you're going to do that, right? That's what states do. That's what militaries are. Inversely, if you can make it really hard to take someone's wealth by force, then we pour ourselves into a new incentive schema where the best way to acquire wealth is through trade and cooperation. So I hope, and the big hope of Bitcoin is that it pushes the world in that direction, because it's very expensive to steal Bitcoin.
Okay, so that's what you meant by make it expensive. And do you synonymize making it expensive with a disincentive, or a disincentive is more broad because that can include violence?
Well, making something expensive is a disincentive to use it, or an incentive to use substitutes, right?
Right. So I'm saying so you don't use the word disincentive because the word disincentive is broader than making it expensive. Expensive implies disincentive, but disincentive doesn't imply. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. There are different types of disincentives other than cost, but you could also put it all under the rubric of risk, make it risky to violate property. That's in terms of it's either going to cost you more, or there might be retribution. You might get hurt, or it might backfire, or whatever it is. So making property more risky to violate is a big push for humans towards productive, cooperative behavior and away from destructive behavior.
I don't like, well, not that I don't like, but I have issues when people say everything is political, and that tends to come from the activist side. I don't hear it much on the activist right side. I hear it on the activist left side, though maybe they say just as much. And
so the last thing I'll say about the politics is what I see in the world is a lot of people yelling and fighting amongst themselves, but what are they, like, zoom it all the way out, what are they doing? They're saying, I think these rules should be the rules in play. And I think
that's, okay.
I think the money that the state is stealing through taxation and inflation should be used to fund the imposition of these rules on others. So if you're like, okay, wait a minute, what should really happen in that situation is the people you're trying to impose rules on, they should just fork off and be their own other society, right? Then you don't have the cost of enforcing these rules, and there's no political dispute to be had. So that's like, it's kind of a radical vision of the future, because we've never had something like Bitcoin to get us to that world of very high consent and very low coercion. But it's a vision that I'm just trying to help energize and animate through these conversations.
Is there a connection between cryptocurrency, not Bitcoin in particular, but cryptocurrency, and consciousness or physics?
Well, I look at all cryptos that are not Bitcoin as basically a scam.
Okay, then choose Bitcoin. It doesn't matter to me. I just want to know, is there
a connection between Bitcoin and consciousness?
And the reason is that I would like to learn more about cryptocurrencies and explore it on the podcast. But I have such a let's paradoxically call it a narrow view of a theory of everything. So like I'm narrowly focused on everything, and so that means that I spend almost all my time thinking about, well, what are the different toes and how do they relate and consciousness and so on. That if I'm to investigate Bitcoin in particular on the podcast, it would need to have some direct, maybe even causal relationship with consciousness. And it does have a relationship with math, clearly, because it's based in math, but also physics. Like is there something about the laws of physics or the way that cryptocurrencies work that can be used as a machine learning model for the way that the universe may have began? And okay,
I don't know.
So you understand.
No, I hear you. It's a hard question for me. I think consciousness is one of the most mysterious words there is. Like we as a species don't seem to have much idea what it is. I have no clue, frankly. But the way I will try to answer your question is, money is at least a really important perceptual apparatus, right? I've brought up the term price signals a lot, but we think through money, right? It's almost like when you see, and this is stock markets, right? You're looking at the prices of things changing. You don't know the story behind that. You don't know the natural disasters or the new production facilities or the new trade agreements that led to that price. All you know is the price. And, often in markets, they say price is truth. So it's like the ultimate economic telecommunications device, the pricing system. And this is, again, what allocates capital intelligently in a capitalistic marketplace, a thing that socialism cannot do. Well, all of that communication is occurring through money, right? We're speaking through dollars or whatever currency it is. So I don't know that there's a relationship between money and consciousness per se, but there's at least one between money and perception. Like it lets us see the world through the eyes of others.
Yeah, and
there
may be a relationship between perception and reality.
Yes. So everyone involved with the cotton price goes up $2.
That's interesting.
Seeing the world through all the eyes of cotton producers and consumers, and where the market is clearing between them, and that's
that's extremely interesting
data compression mechanism, right? You can see the eyes of so many people in one number.
Okay, so when you say price, I'm translating in my head to worth, but you say no, don't.
Price is an exchange ratio. So instead of saying this house cost 11 cars, right? Because everything trades at some ratio of everything else. You say house is $440,000, equal to 11 of these $40,000 cars. So it's money is like an economic language of numeracy, right? A common economic language of numeracy in a way. And so instead of talking all these ratios, like how many chairs does a house cost and house does a car cost, you just say the price in money, and it's easier to perform economic calculation.
Okay. I don't think I should have used the word worth. What I meant was, where should one spend their attention? Spend. As soon as you say the word spend, then you think of it as a commodity. As soon as you think of it as that, you think of it as something with a number, and that some are valued higher. So you think of it on an ordered number line. So something with an echelon. So then you can decide you pay attention to some things and not others, and that's influenced by price. Is that I need to work through this, but it's extremely interesting. I never thought about that before.
Yeah, no,
about how price influences perception. But perception, to me, I'm not convinced of this, but there are convincing arguments, or so let's say potentially convincing arguments, that there's a relationship between perception and reality. There's certainly a relationship between perception and consciousness, and so I that's my huge, like, thank you for giving me that, man.
Oh, happy to do it. And there's reciprocal feedback though, because all this distillation of market actions gets compressed into the price, but then the price is also informing all those market actors what to do.
Right. Yeah.
So if the price is up, then I'm going to consume less, produce more, and vice versa if it's down. So it's this feedback. You're talking about centralization, decentralization earlier. It's like everything centralizes to the price, but then it informs the decentralized actions of all those market participants.
Okay.
And so it's just like a never-ending feedback loop, I guess.
Uh-huh.
And that's probably how cognition works in some way. I'm not super familiar on this, but again, I would call that distributed cognition. Right? You've got a bunch of minds interconnected by the price signal, and they're moving in concert based on how that price moves. So you've wired together a distributed cognitive network. I would imagine the individual cognitive network works in some way similar to that.
We also certainly sexual selection works like that. Have you heard of assortative dating?
No.
Sorry. Yes, it's called assortative dating, but the studies on it where you put a number on your head and no one knows their own number, but they're all looking at each other. You've seen studies like this, or you've heard of this? Okay, so you get people in a room and you say, like, who do you want to make out with? Something like that. Like, choose a partner that you're willing to make out with. We're not going to get you to make out with them, but choose someone you're willing to make out with. Generally, the people who are best looking pair up with one another, and then it just goes down to the worst looking people, or what we think of as the worst looking people. Okay, if you say now do the same, except you have a number on your head, it's either 1 to 10. You don't know which one yours is, but you can see everyone else's. Then even if you're a 10 physically, if your number is 3, you look at someone else and you're able to judge unconsciously the way that they look at you, and someone else who so essentially someone else who is a 10 would look at you as a 3 and not want to join you. Somehow they unconsciously know their own number, and then they pair up with numbers that match each other, even though you don't know your own number.
Wow.
Okay. Well.
So they know.
And the reason I was saying that, I forget. There's a point to this. Okay. Well. Anyway, the fact that you're evaluated as a number, and then that has such meaning, then means that price is There's a relationship between price and value. I know that you didn't want to say price and worth, but there is a relationship.
There is. So Austrian economists would say that all value, the process of valuation, it's always a matter of where basically you have a preference for something, right? Here's the first thing you want, the second thing you want, the third thing you want. So they are ordinal, right? These are you have like a best friend, a second best friend, a third best friend. It doesn't make sense to be like, this best friend is 75 points more than my second best friend.
Okay. Oh, I see.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas the world of cardinal numbers, like something in pricing, is something you can compare and say, this is $50, $5. It's not ordinal. So the pricing system is converting ordinal value expression into a cardinal numeral system. And so that's very useful, that you're kind of converting something qualitative, right, which is just preference, into something that's quantitative, which is a price. And so it lets us engage in this distributed compute model we call the free market.
Okay, man, I gotta get going.
Okay, yeah.
I appreciate you spending so much time with me.
Yeah,
and inviting me on.
I appreciate the conversation too. Do you have time for one more, or should you jump off now?
Sure. No, I have time for one more.
Okay.
I have another 6 minutes or so.
Okay, so we'll just leave it with one big question here. Is there a guest or conversation that took you down an unexpected path that you are currently going down? And if so, what is that path? What I'm thinking about a lot recently from the show.
Yeah, like I mentioned, it's easier for me to find people who were dull than that were engaging. But the last two, so Ian McGilchrist and Tim Maudlin. So Tim Maudlin, I talked to him about interpretations of quantum mechanics, and that made me. He doesn't call. It's interesting. He doesn't call what physicists study in undergrad or graduate studies, or even PhD level, he doesn't call that quantum theory. He calls that quantum mechanics or quantum field theory, but he doesn't like to use the word theory because to him, theory means that you have to know what you're talking about. It's not just a mathematical description. You need to have an ontology as well, or show how this math relates to what is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he includes, as soon as you have an interpretation of quantum mechanics on top of quantum mechanics, then you have a quantum theory.
Mm.
At least this is his terminology. And okay, so that's interesting. And I personally, I like mathematics. And I think that much can be gleaned from the, well, not much, plenty can be gleaned from the mathematics to the interpretation. Speaking with him, I'm less certain about that. And I'm much more interested now in interpretations of quantum mechanics. And so maybe I'll dedicate an entire section of the book to interpretations of quantum mechanics because I'd like to understand them more. And okay, so that's a rabbit hole I'm going down that I thought I had explored, but I'm realizing it was vacuous. So I'm interested in that. Then with Ian McGilchrist, well, he just bangs on all cylinders of mine. Consciousness, philosophy. Well, see, I think that there are these people who label themselves as skeptics. And I think that I don't think you should label yourself as a skeptic. I think that you should be an open-minded investigator of what is, and not a skeptic. And that includes some paradigm agnostic inquiry as to you're open to other definitions of what is.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes they have these self-evident truths. I don't think being or what is simple. And also when people talk about God, I'm super interested in different definitions of God. And I happen to think that whenever anyone says God is so-and-so, like they come up with a definition, I think it's false. I think that anything that you place into that blank of God is so-and-so will automatically demean it. And it's like akin to constructing an idol. But anyway, so Ian McGilchrist bangs on all of those cylinders. And I'm wrestling with those. It's super, super fun. And it's super destabilizing as well. So it's not fun. Like, jeez.
Fun
Like,
and not fun.
No, yeah, it's not fun.
Good paradox.
It's right. Yeah.
Okay.
I want to tell you one more paradox, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
It's just one that I heard the other day, and I thought this is super fun. So it's called, I don't know what it's called, like the surprise paradox. So it goes like, a teacher says there's going to be a surprise test. You will be surprised. That's the condition. And it's like it's a school teacher, so it's Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, not the weekends. Okay, so and it's next week. You're going to be surprised next week. There's a test coming up. So the students then confer with each other. They're like, oh shoot, when is it going to be? They think, you know what? If it is going to be a surprise, it can't be Friday. Why? Because by Thursday evening, if we hadn't had the test, we know it's tomorrow. So we're certain it's tomorrow. It's no longer a surprise. Okay, now we've ruled out Friday. By that same logic, we can rule out Thursday. And then by the same logic, we can rule out Wednesday. By the same logic, we can rule out Tuesday. By the same logic, we can rule out Monday. There's not going to be a surprise test next week. It's impossible. Then the teacher comes. So that's already interesting. But then the teacher comes, and at noon on Wednesday, they get a test. And she's like, surprise. So everything the teacher said came true. There was a surprise test, because they had ruled out the fact that there would be a surprise. And the question is, well, how is this all possible? Like, where's the flaw in this logic? And this apparently has been debated again for decades and decades. It's something that I am thinking about too. So that's what I'm thinking about.
So there's something about expectation in these paradox. And the last example, I think too, you gave, I don't Well, it's quite the trip to think about, to say the least.
Yeah. Then there's the liar's paradox. Like, this sentence is false.
Right.
It's true. If it's true, it's false.
Right.
It's like analogize that to Pinocchio's nose. Like, he says, "My nose grows now." Yeah. Well, if he's lying, then his nose wouldn't grow. But then if his nose is not going to grow, that means he was lying, so it should grow.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. We live
Yeah.
trapped in language.
Yeah. I don't know how much of what we're doing even here is like a sin, because we're just muddying the waters by speaking. I have intimations of that, like, but I also am not fully convinced that there's two routes to go. I'll end with this. There are two routes. You can make the case that language is just pragmatic. It's just use. And that's the Wittgenstein case. And I think, to me, that's the easiest case to make. And I'm of the position that the easiest case to make is well, the primrose path is usually one that's false in some manner. So I don't, it could be the case. Like sometimes there's
Like
just an easy answer.
Occam's razor, right? Just languages for utility.
Yeah. And there are issues with Occam's razor too. We can talk about that another time. But anyway, like people love it. Tim Maudlin talks about this. He's like, if you think there's a single adage that can get you to choose between two theories, like you're mistaken. That's not how the world works.
Right.
And also then you wonder, well, what's an assumption? If you just put an and between two assumptions, is that now one assumption? If I say God did it, is that one assumption, or is that like 50 assumptions? Is God one or 50? Like, who knows what an assumption is?
Right.
Anyway, so there's the case to be made that language is just for use, and that it's not meant to investigate these metaphysical questions. Or there's the case that we need more explicit language, a more explicated language, so more differentiation rather than more unity. And I don't know, as the analytic part and the experiential part of me are torn in different directions. And I think maybe there's a third option or a fourth, like we just keep breaking it down analytically, experientially. Are those the two? Is there a third? Is there a multitude? Is there 12? There's something holy about the number 12, so I tend to like that. It's just mystically, it's fun. 12. But I don't know. Anyway, it's good talking with you, man. Yeah, and if people are interested in the sorts of questions that I ask here, or the sorts of topics that we raised here, then visit Theories of Everything, type that into YouTube, into Spotify, iTunes, and so on, and you'll and browse through the guest list. There's quite a few. There's Chomsky, who's been on 8 times. He's coming up again. And then there's Tim Maudlin and Stephen Wolfram and Eric Weinstein and Jordan Peterson, though Jordan Peterson interviewed me, much like you. That must have been like, oh man, this is so cool. Yeah, it's like the largest platform I've been on, so I was super nervous during that. But anyway, thanks, man.
Yeah, Curt, thank you so much. Really enjoyed this conversation. Hope we can do it again.
Yeah,